So we start on page 172 with topic 8.2, World War I. Good? All right. So we know that World War I has a variety of factors. There's an acronym for the start of World War I. So page 172. Do any of you lovely folks remember what that acronym is? Four causes. First one starts with M, then A. Are you doing the YMCA there, McLean? I gotta go to the end, huh? N.
Maine.
Maine, yeah, good job, Miranda. All right. So Maine, militarism, and you see this on page 172. Militarism, alliance systems, imperialism, and nationalism. So militarism, we've been building up a large stockpile of weapons for quite a while now. We also have a pretty blasé attitude about the whole thing, kind of like college kids on spring break in Florida last week, where we don't realize the severity of our actions. That we haven't had a war in a long time, so we don't really take it seriously. And if we go to war, it's fine, we're going to win, so whatever. Alliances, we know they're secretive. We don't often know if I'm going to go punch Jack in the face. I don't know who Jack's friends are, so I think I can take Jack, probably so, but Jack's got 5 friends who are going to join in. I don't think I can take 6 of them, so I don't know that, so it might cause me to be more aggressive than I probably should be because I don't know who is waiting for me if I attack Jack. So that's part of it. And of course, we only form alliances if we feel like we need them. We're concerned about potential aggressive military action. We're paranoid about it. So that's part of it. I, imperialism. We know that we've had imperial tensions. The Germans especially are wanting to add more to their empire because they did not participate in the first round back in 1884. So the Germans are being punks, especially the French. That causes tension. And then nationalism. We're the best. Our country is awesome. We clearly are the greatest power in the world. And therefore, no need to be concerned about a war because we're going to win. So Maine, which all of you remember now. Okay. Moving on to the next page, 173, new tech. We have a list there on page 172. Which of those listed, somebody help me out, which of those technologies do you think is probably most impactful in World War I? All right, Klein saying machine gun. You can turn off your sound or unmute yourself. Any other votes beside machine gun?
Submarine.
Submarine. Okay, that's they do think about ships. Submarine from Maddie.
Yeah, submarine.
Jealously as we watch Maddie sit outside. Ugh. Hey, I'm going to the park as soon as this is over, so I feel you. I would say machine gun or submarine are probably your 2 most likely options. I would vote for machine gun just because it literally changes our entire techniques. We have no trench warfare in the West without machine guns. There's just no need for it. We'd be still doing what we do and marching rows across battlefields towards our enemies. All that good stuff. All right. Any questions about that? Okay. And that's why it says confounded traditional military strategies. I love this study guide because clearly some frustrated English major helped write it because the vocab's really great. What does it mean to confound something?
Confuse.
Yes, confuse, David. You got it. All right. Next one on page 173. Military stalemate, national mobilization, blah, blah, blah. Protest and insurrection. So we are going to have people that are upset that are going to rebel in numerous countries. Again, on page 172, in your illustrative examples, the best example, the Russian Revolution. We know that Russia sucks really bad in World War I. They shoot more bullets in one day than their factories can make in a month. And so that is a direct cause of the Russian Revolution, but we'll hear more about that later. I'll also briefly mention, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this, Ireland. We know Ireland has wanted to be independent for a long time. That's a huge issue in the 19th century. We finally make an agreement for Ireland to have home rule in 1914. This is, again, the college kid, like many people who came home from school early, living in their parents' house, being frustrated because they have rules at home they didn't have at college. But then World War I breaks out, and Great Britain's like, yo, Ireland, I don't have time for all this. So we will work out the details of your independence after the war. To which the Irish are like, don't think so. So in 1916, the Irish leader publicly declares his support for Germany in the war. And then they stage a revolution in Dublin during World War I, hoping the British cannot help put it down. They end up doing so, but it's frustrating. If you go to Dublin today, which I've been, it's at the post office is where they start of all places, and they never repaired it. You can still see the bullet holes and all the destruction that happened from there. And then Ireland becomes independent in 1922. So a couple years after the war, we worked that out. All right. So, but Russia's the most important one. So the war spreads elsewhere. An example I would use on page 172 is obviously the Turks, the Ottomans, are going to be destroyed as a result of World War I. Many of the people living under Ottoman control are Arab, not Turks. And so the British are going to help promote revolution to end that empire's rule in Eastern Europe and give them one less front to fight on, because the British are fighting the Turks. And if we can get the natives of the territories the Ottomans control to revolt, then we don't need to spend any troops or money there, and we can focus on defeating those Germans, which would be our preference. All right. And then we see at the end there, the relationship between Europe and the world changes. We see some of their empires collapse. The example I'm going to use on page 172 is the breaking up of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Franz Joseph, the emperor since 1848, dies in 1916. He is replaced, but whenever they decide that they're going to drive that empire apart as part of losing World War I, so we create part of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, a separate Hungary, a separate Austria, and they lose some of their territory, for example, in the Balkan Peninsula. So we see the breakup of that empire and the creation of new states in Europe as a result of World War I. Any questions, comments, thoughts from anybody? All stuff you've heard before. Okay, good. Let's move on. Hey, Zane, can you hear me? Just make sure you type and let me know that you're hearing okay. Page 174, 8.3, Russian Revolution. All right, I'm going to ask for your all's assistance here. Somebody help me to understand about the Russian Revolution. It says the Russian Revolution created a regime based on Marxist-Leninist theory. We all know Karl Marx is a little different than what we see with Vladimir Lenin. Can anybody think of a difference between the original philosophy of Marx, because that's something we still will be tested on, 19th century, and Vladimir Lenin? How does he change the philosophy in the Soviet Union versus what we saw in Marxist theory?
Lenin wanted to make things like, he wanted to push the revolution instead of waiting for it to happen.
Okay, so we're gonna have to force it, then rather let the people do it. Good, that's one. I'll take another one.
The Marx talked about the proletariat, and Lenin talked about the I forget what they were called, but they were basically a form of the like intelligent bourgeois that would like inform the peasants.
Yes, so you actually have two differences there. One is we don't have a lot of industrial factory workers in Russia, so we have to include our peasants because otherwise there's nobody to revolt. And second, the acknowledgement that having a revolution of the people, kind of similar to what David said, is just impractical. So the middle class is going to lead the revolution in the name of the poor, knowing that Marx himself said the middle class were our villains. So those are two, you actually got two differences in one there. So that's good. Excellent. So we move on. We know that World War I makes a lot of things that have been bad in Russia for a long time worse. The word exacerbated, great word, that makes things worse. So we have a government that is stagnant. The Tsar, still in 1917, believes in divine right, absolute monarchy. That he has been chosen by God, he can do no wrong, and his answer when things start to go wrong in Russia is just like, God will fix it, it's fine, don't worry about it. Which is great, that's nothing wrong with believing that, but you might want to have a backup plan as well. And so that's the problem that we see, is his just refusal to modernize or believe that anything needs to be changed on his end. It will all work itself out. And of course, we know that is absolutely not true. So
didn't he go to the front line of the war during World War I?
Because he believes that's God's mandate to him, and he needs to go, which of course he has no idea what to do, so it makes it worse. We have two revolutions. The first one is in March. Your study guide says February, March. Remember, the Russians are still using a different calendar at that point. So it's February in Russia, it's March the rest of the world, so we'll use March. The Tsar abdicates. We've had protests and strikes in the big cities for a couple months, mainly because we're running out of food. And so it's winter, which we know is always bad in Russia, and we're taking what little food we have and sending it to the front, and we're still losing. We're still dying. What's the point of all this? So we start protesting. The Tsar quits in March to hopefully avoid any sort of attack on he or his family. He says that neither he nor his son will ever take the throne. at least him again and his son ever, which is pretty remarkable. And then they are going to get arrested, and we know what happens to him anyway, of course. So we have the so-called, in the second example there on page 174, the provisional government or temporary. They are liberal Democrats who want to have an election and hope that they will win office. So we have no political history in Russia of any of this, so it's going to take us a while to actually form this stuff, which is kind of remarkable. And what does end up happening is we make no major policy changes. They feel like since they were not elected, it would be unfair to make changes in the interim without that political support they feel like they should have, which means we're going to stay in World War I. We're going to die by the thousands daily. We're going to still have shortages of food. We're going to still suffer. And that's going to be a real source of discontent. And that's something that Lenin and pals will certainly jump on. So it says Lenin's long-planned Bolshevik revolution. We know Lenin tries to overthrow the government and will be successful in October. He, for some reason, decides to let the election happen anyway. Now, this is not an election for king. They were electing a parliament, not any sort of other. So he's still the executive, but we have a legislative branch that he is not in charge of. That parliament will meet one day in January 1918. Lenin's like, nope, not my thing. And then he tells them to go away. This is one of the main causes in the third example there of a civil war. When we see the word protracted, we know like a protractor in math. What does protracted mean? Anybody?
Like drawn out? Or
Yes.
Like...
Perfect. So drawn out. So we get the Reds or the communists, the Bolsheviks, against everybody else. It's a weird coalition of lots of different people, people that want to go back to the Tsar, people that want liberal democracy, and everybody in between. They're called the whites just to differentiate themselves from the communists. And then foreign powers help. The British send soldiers and money. America sends soldiers and money. The French send soldiers and money, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these other people trying to contribute to what's happening. All right. Now, the Civil War, as you can imagine, 3 months after the end of World War I is problematic. We have food shortages. We still have angry, frustrated people. And not to mention, we have implemented communism during the Civil War. The government is taking over big businesses, and that is causing the economy to suffer. So towards the end of the Civil War, we have a famine in the spring of 1921. At least 5 million people starved to death in that famine. So it's bad, 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 bad. And so what we do is Lenin undergoes the new economic policy. So generically named because what is it really, young folk?
Capitalism.
Capitalism. Very good, Miranda. So it's going to allow people to buy private land. It's going to allow them to make profit on a small business, and the economy starts to recover to some extent. So that is something that we will see. And again, one of the great what ifs, if Lenin had lived and Stalin didn't take over, would we have continued down that path of flexibility? Probably, maybe, who knows? There's no way to know, but that's one of those great questions. All right, 8.4, the Treaty of Versailles. Oh boy, we know this is a problem. All right, so I know there's the details here, but somebody tell me right now, what is the big problem with the Treaty of Versailles? Why is it a problem for the Germans and then the rest of the world?
They put big reparations on Germany.
Okay, why, according to the logic they have?
They don't want them to.
Go ahead, Jacob.
They don't want them to like do the Nazi thing again.
Well, this is before they did the Nazi thing.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, this is pre-Nazi. So France has been mad at Germany for 48 years. The Franco-Prussian War ends in 1871. And by 1919, it's been 48 years that Alsace-Lorraine, as Vitis was referencing there. Guys, if you want to speak, please do just speak, because I'm going to keep going until you stop me. So that's fine. But you're going to have to pretend you're me. Be forceful. All right? Do that opera solo. Just like let her rip. And so what that means is that we are frustrated. So you see what it says, pitted diplomatic idealism against the desire to punish Germany. Wilson comes in with his 14 points apiece. Like, we're going to heal the world. We're going to make the seas open and safe. We're going to make the world safe for democracy. We're going to have national self-determination, blah, 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 blah. And France is like, we would like the Germans to suffer. So that's what it is, all right? And so that's their attitude, and it's very different than what we see between the others, and eventually France wins. The treaty says Germany did it. Germany's got to pay for it. $442 billion modern dollars. Ridiculous. All right. And that's going to lead to a bunch of problems, which we know and we'll discuss shortly. The League of Nations. The League of Nations is a goal to try to prevent further conflict. Can anyone tell me why the League of Nations does not work well in the 1920s and 30s?
Because America doesn't join.
Okay, no America. The
Yeah.
Germans and the Soviets will be short-term members and pull out. The Japanese will also pull out in 1931. So it's going to have some of the biggest, most powerful states in the world not join and not participate. That is a challenge, and that's a problem we're going to have to fix. Okay, and then you see the last one there. Germany's Weimar Republic will struggle because you're a brand new government. You're trying to do something that's never been done in your country before, complete democracy, liberal democracy. Oh, and by the way, you owe $500 billion. I mean, how do you do that? And so it just really makes it difficult. On the one I skipped there on the illustrative example, you see democratic successor states there. We have all these new countries created in Eastern Europe on page 175 out of the former German Empire, the Austrian Empire, the Russian Empire. Most of them will start off as democracies, but they will fall to the same pressures that we see in Germany and Italy. And by World War II, only Czechoslovakia is still a democracy. The others, Poland, Hungary, and Yugoslavia, all become dictatorships because of the Great Depression, because of the pressures from World War I, blah, 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 blah. So only Czechoslovakia will remain a democracy. Okay, now on the back, page 176, we see the League of Nations takes German territories and Ottoman territories and gives them to France and Britain through the mandate system. The mandate system is basically training. We're going to create new states, and we're going to teach them how to be independent. Now, oddly enough, we do not extend this right to our African and Asian friends. But we're going to teach these countries how to be independent. The reason we do so is laid out very plainly in the study guide point. It is going to allow the British and the French to get access to more oil. Because France doesn't have any oil in its country. Britain doesn't have any in theirs. Now, eventually today, we've got oil platforms in the North Sea that are a part of Scotland, just like we have them in the Gulf of Mexico. One of the main reasons why, tangent, that the UK doesn't want Scotland to leave, that would also cost them all their oil in the North Sea because it's all up in the north by Norway. So that's another reason why we do not want the Scots to leave us if we're British, because that would really hurt our economic interests because we'd lose a lot of our access to oil. So anyway, remember, if you ever want to look at why things are happening, look at money. Money has a lot to do with most things. So the mandate example you see on page 175, Lebanon and Syria are French. They're going to be in charge of that one. Iraq is British. Palestine, of course, nobody knows what to do with that one, so we just keep that one going on. And it's not until after World War II when the British turn it over to the United Nations and say, you all fix it. We don't know what to do. You all make a better answer for how to handle this situation. Okay, so that is 8.4. Questions or comments there? In other words, the world's a mess in the 1920s and 30s. I think you already knew that, but there you go. Oh, and now it's going to get worse because it's the Great Depression. Yay! Again, just to give you some context. Remember this, in 1933, Germany had 30% unemployment. The Treasury Secretary 2 days ago said a worst case scenario for America right now would be 20% unemployment, and numerous people quickly said, that's not even really even the worst case, it would be way less than that. So even the worst case scenario kind of said off the cuff by a cabinet member who then got rebuked by a bunch of people like, nah, it'd be like 15, 12, which is still not good, but it's still 10% better than the Great Depression. And right now, you know, if you can't telecommute, there's a lot of people not working right now or having ability, restaurant workers, et cetera, et cetera. So as bad as that is, Great Depression was 10% worse at the worst estimate for what's going on right now. So that to me puts it in context of how bad this situation actually was. Okay, so I think that's important. All right, anyway, page 177. Somebody tell me some causes of the Great Depression. Anything.
The stocks that they were buying.
Okay, so American consumers being aggressive with loans and stock buying, and then when the market crashes, going to cause everything. Yes, that's the end, but sure. Something European-based, perhaps?
Well,
Maddie, go ahead.
Didn't France and Britain spent all the money that they expected Germany to pay back from the Treaty of Versailles?
And is Germany paying all that money back?
No, they cannot. So
No, so that's a
everyone's
problem.
losing money.
Yes, that's a problem. Good. Okay. Anything else?
Like, weren't tariffs also a problem?
Yes, because if I put a tariff on you, Vitish, what are you going to do to me?
Put a tariff on you.
And who does that hurt?
The consumers.
Yeah, average people, because prices go up, and that's the problem with these for the most part. So yeah, because it says nationalistic tariff policies. We're doing it to protect our own economy, but in long term, we're making it worse. All right. You also see it says new economic theories and policies on the right-hand side. Keynesianism. John Maynard Keynes, British economist, who says basically in times of economic trouble, rich people are not going to spend money because they're going to hold on to it. They can afford to ride it out, so they'll just go live in their mansion. Poor people don't have any extra to use. They're trying to, they're trying to survive, so they are not going to spend money. Therefore, somebody's got to spend money. That somebody should be the government. Think of it like the analogy of an engine with gasoline. Somebody's got to go put gas in the tank, and that's going to be the government. So in the United States, you see like the New Deal. Hitler's going to have people build the Autobahn. So your public works projects often are how we do that. And then it gets the economy going again, and then we recover later on. Because when the economy is poor, not only is it bad for restaurants and consumers and stores, it's bad for the government, because when you don't work, you don't pay taxes. So the government's got to get money going at some point for that to continue. All right. The second one David mentioned there is about World War I. American investment capital. We're loaning money to a lot of people, and then people are having trouble paying those loans back, and or America no longer is loaning out the money after the stock market crash. And so Western democracies really struggle to solve these problems. And so we see the rise of extremism, either on the far left or the far right. We do see some attempts at political alliance on the right-hand side, page 177, your study guide. The Popular Front and the national government mean the same thing. We have a coalition of left and right come together to try to unify and solve the problems of the nation, as opposed to normal political bickering. Wow, what an interesting concept. Okay. So that's what that is, which we don't see very often. That's how bad the Great Depression was. We get liberals and conservatives to talk to each other and want to actually work together. Okay, moving on. Page 178, 8.6, totalitarianism and fascism. We got into some of this stuff. I didn't get to do as much Nazism as I would have liked, but that's okay. I can make some recommendations. There's lots of good stuff available for you to watch or devour if you are so interested. So we know, where is fascism and Nazism on the political spectrum?
Far right.
Far right, correct. So one of the logic points of our fascists and our Nazis is that to stop the far left, like communism, you need to have the far right. And trust me, there are communist movements in all these countries. All of them have a communist party. They're actively recruiting members. They're trying to spread. Remember, workers of the world unite. That is not paranoia to think that the communists want to spread globally. They want to spread globally, and they say so. So that is a concern that we have. We'll see fascist dictatorships use propaganda. The Nazis film everything, all the speeches, parades, all of it. They do that. An example of propaganda, I'll mention two of them briefly. Joseph Goebbels, who is the propaganda minister for the Nazi Party. He's Dr. Goebbels. He was a professor of literature. He is Hitler's promo guy. He writes a lot of Hitler's speeches. He will be somebody to promote these concepts. One of my neighbors is knocking on my door. I'll have to get that later. So actually, I have an elderly neighbor. Let me pause real quick. So anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, fascism, Joseph Goebbels. So Goebbels, and this is quite the thing. He might be the most evil Nazi. And that's saying a lot, because the Nazis are pretty freaking evil. He is the one that takes over for Hitler when Hitler dies by suicide. And then he and his wife will do the same thing. Normally, I would show you this movie at the end of the year, but I don't know if we're going to get to watch it. So I'll just talk about it. It's called Downfall. It's on Amazon Prime. If you're looking for something fascinating to watch, I highly recommend it. It is a German film that comes out in 2004. It is the first German film to show Hitler as a character 59 years after the end of World War II. And in it, the Goebbels have 6 children. Mrs. Goebbels will bring her kids to the bunker where Hitler is, convince him to lead Germany to the great victory. And after he commits suicide and his wife does, she will poison all 6 of her children because she, quote, does not want them to live in a world without National Socialism, end quote. So yikes. And then she and her husband will kill themselves, and their bodies are burned as well. but not completely because they use most of the gasoline for Hitler's body. So there are pictures on the internet, not that you want to look, but there are pictures on the internet of the charred corpses of the Goebbels couple, shall we say. And there are pictures, and it's some of the saddest stuff I've ever seen in my life, of all 6 of the kids lined up because she just poisons her own kids because she does not want them to live without Hitler, because how could you move on without Hitler? Yikes. So anyway, but the movie Downfall is powerful. It's really, really good. It's heavy, but it's a fantastic film. It's in German though. You got to watch subtitles, but it's on Amazon Prime if you are so inclined. Anyway, so the other one I'll mention briefly is Leni Riefenstahl. She is a young woman. She's in her mid-20s. She is the propaganda filmmaker for Hitler. She does Triumph of the Will. She does Olympia. If you went to film school in the 60s and 70s, and they still do this, she made beautiful movies. They're Nazi propaganda, but they're beautiful movies. So I'll give you a reference. Star Wars 4, A New Hope, the original movie. At the end, after the Death Star is destroyed, spoiler alert, the main characters receive a medal, not Chewbacca, until the very last movie. Thankfully, they rectified that. And they're marching down this long aisle while lots of people on both sides are clapping. Does anybody have an idea of what I'm talking about at the very end of the first Star Wars movie? Some of you nerds get it. Yes. That scene is lifted literally shot for shot as they walk down from Triumph of the Will, a Nazi propaganda film. Not because George Lucas is a Nazi. He's not, but because he's like, yeah, we watched her stuff in film school because she's remarkable. Like, she's a beautiful filmmaker, but she's also a Nazi sympathizer. She lived to be 100 years old. And to her dying day, she refused to say it was propaganda. She's like, no, I was independent. I did. And I show like a 5-minute clip of this in class. I didn't get a chance to, but it's super propagandistic. And to the day she died, she never admitted that it was propaganda, that she loved Hitler. She's like, I was just doing a job. I was making money to support myself. That's complete BS, but that's what she always said. So that's when we talk about propaganda, that kind of stuff. So Leni Riefenstahl, if you have an interest, look her stuff up. Nobody would hire her after 1945, so she spent most of the rest of her life doing like nature photography, like underwater photography, and she was an innovator in underwater photography of animals, which is, she was brilliant, just she was a Nazi. So yeah, it's kind of a problem. All right, anyway, we see the rise of authoritarian dictatorships, not just in Germany and Italy, but also in other parts of Europe. Some of those states on the previous page that had been democracies, like Poland and Hungary, become dictatorships as well, for the same reasons we see them happening in Germany and Italy, money problems, etc. And then we see Mussolini and Hitler rose to power because of their various things, all that stuff. Now, some good vocab here, though, I'll make sure we all understand. What does it mean to, when it says fledgling there in the bottom of 178? Something is fledgling.
Like an offspring, a child?
Nope. Good guess.
It's like very young or very new.
Is it growing?
Kind of like growing is what, so not too far off, guys, but yeah, like growing, like it's not fully formed yet. So child is right, but it's not quite the context I was looking for. So they use terror and fear. We both have secret police. We've got the brown shirts and the black shirts. The Nazis will have the Gestapo, going after Jewish people in the late 1930s, etc. So the next page, we have the Soviet Union. Once again, we have illustrative examples on one side and the things they belong to on the other. We have the Spanish Civil War on page 179. Franco is a fascist. He is going to support the Nazis and the Italians bombing his enemies in the war just to see if their military works. And Franco will be a dictator of Spain until 1975. So again, Spain doesn't become, if you look at like NATO or the European Union, Spain doesn't join either of those till the 1980s because they're a dictatorship all the way up until early 1980s. Excuse me. And then authoritarian dictatorships all over. I don't know what that last point is. It's kind of similar to what we already discussed. All right, the bottom of page 179, Stalin takes power. We know he's the archetypal dictator. He is what a lot of other societies will base their dictatorships on. So we look at the previous page at those examples. We know he has 5-year economic plans where the government will plan everything out and say what the goals are and your quota as an individual in your factory. So this is how many of this you're going to make for these 5 years, and we're going to check you every month to make sure you made it. So it's boom, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then it's oppressive. We have the gulags, the secret prison camps. We have the Cheka, the secret police that, basically arrest people and murder people for whatever reason Stalin wants. And we have the purges where we kill people that we're afraid might try to challenge our power. So those are all things that Stalin does, and we see those adopted by other dictatorships as well. All right. Are we good? We're almost done with Unit 8, and then we'll do just a couple. We're going to do 2 into period 9, and then we will finish the rest of 9 on Monday. All right, because 9's a little longer than 8. So we're about 3/4 of the way done, just to give you an update. All right, 8.7, Europe during the interwar period. This is, again, why do we not stop the Nazis earlier? We talked about this. Can anybody justify why the French or the British are not going to be, or the Americans as well, why do we not step up and do something to stop Nazism earlier?
Because
We have a lot of
Really good facade.
Go ahead, Jacob, go ahead, then invite Tishu after him, okay?
Okay. Like in Britain and stuff, the thought of another war was so unpopular that they went to like appeasement instead. And like a lot of people just didn't care, especially because not a lot of people knew about like the extermination plans or stuff like that.
Okay, that's part of it. Vaitish, what else?
I was saying like Hitler and the Nazi party put up a really good facade. Like the 1936 Olympics, like America, Britain, France, everybody was there, and like there never was a visible problem, so like they never had to fear anything, so they put up a really good facade.
That's good. So for
it was also like,
go ahead.
There was like the Americans and British, like everywhere, they were struggling with the Great Depression themselves, so they were just looking to help themselves.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add to Jacob's point is that, remember, we have millions of new voters since World War I, especially in Britain and America. So if we're going to go to war, we better have a really good reason for doing so, because if we don't, we are probably going to get voted out the next election. So that's definitely a part of our calculus as we try to decide what choices we're going to make. All right. Yeah. And then it says all these things are bad. So I would agree with that. The example on the left-hand side, this is from that handout, The Steps to World War II. I always focus on the Munich Agreement. We know that Hitler had done several aggressive things, violating the Treaty of Versailles, none of which had been stopped. And so that is part of it. We know that when he invades the Sudetenland, which is part of Czechoslovakia, that it used to be German. That's where German people live. Hitler's excuse, once again, is I'm just reuniting Germany. That's fine. There's nothing to see here. They want us. It's all good. I promise the rest of Czechoslovakia I'll leave alone. The British and the French make him sign a peace treaty where he says that is the case, and then they will invade him if he doesn't follow. And Chamberlain comes home to Britain, stupidly waves around that paper and says we have peace for our time. And then 6 months later, more invasion, more conquest, and what do? Nothing. So we don't respond. What you all talked about, I think, are all valid excuses for the first couple events, 1935, 1936. When you're sitting down with this guy and realizing what he's about, and you make him sign a treaty, and then 6 months later you literally refuse to do what you'd signed, that's the point where I stop feeling sorry for them and say, you're the one who made this agreement, do something about it. And they just don't. So, and we know what's coming because of it. All right, World War II, y'all are all experts. You did awesome presentations 2 weeks ago now. Boy, it seems like 6 months ago. But 2 weeks ago now, y'all did some awesome World War II presentations. So I'm very pleased with what y'all did. So I know you are great experts and can crush this. So Blitzkrieg or Lightning War, great example, the surrender of France. France is gone in 6 weeks versus in World War I, they had fought with the Germans for 4.5 years to pretty much stand still. So that shows you the power of the German military. The Japanese are also conquering a bunch of land in Asia as well. Eventually, the Americans and the British combined to have massive militaries with great technological superiority. Also, it's called a total war. I just saw a news story yesterday where the British government has asked Jaguar and Rolls-Royce, two of their famous car companies, to start making ventilators in the case that they are needed as the epidemic potentially gets, or pandemic gets worse in Great Britain. So we will have enough ventilators on hand if people need respiratory assistance. And so that is like a World War II thing. We're not going to make cars anymore. We're going to make tanks, and we're going to make, airplanes and that kind of stuff. So that's definitely part of it. Winston Churchill is going to be a great leader for the British and promote with his speeches and his calmness and his encouragement. He kind of makes everybody happy and makes them feel better about the situation. I'm not saying that our current governor is Winston Churchill, but I think if you ever watch any of Andy Bashir's press conferences, you see a similar attempt. I'll use the word attempt to try to provide the same vibe. Like, we're good. It's going to be okay. It's all going to be fine. Like, let's not panic. He calls people out, like bingo halls and Pikeville and stuff. Like, I need to close. I mean, he's that kind of thing. And Churchill is very much kind of the same. I don't think Bashir is giving his drunk, though, versus Churchill was pretty much sauced almost every time he spoke. But that's a different story. So anyway, And we know that because of all this military technology, World War II is a much more technological war. These tanks can go 40 and 50 miles an hour. We have all this bombing technology. The airplanes are much better. We also have nuclear weapons, which makes the conflict much, much worse, obviously. All right, moving on, page 182. This is our second to last one in topic 8. The Holocaust. All of you know the Holocaust. You've read and studied about it for most of your academic career, so I know you're good on that, but just a couple of points there. We know that Hitler does not create anti-Semitism. There has already been a strong anti-Jewish sentiment in Europe for about 100 years with the nationalist movements of the 19th century. We decide, and this is again period 3, so this is going to be on our test. We decide who we are as a people, which is often our language or our food or our dress. And the Jews don't do any of this stuff. They don't eat the same foods we do in Germany. They don't speak our language often most of the time. They don't wear our clothes. So they're not real Germans, even though they were born there, lived there, pay taxes there. So that comes out. Hitler capitalizes on that. He also capitalizes on the fact that the economy sucks and he's going to fix it, and people are mad about Versailles and he's going to fix that. So yes, there are anti-Semites in Germany, millions of them. But do I think the majority of the German population was anti-Semitic? No, I don't. I think they got swallowed in by everything else. And then when it started happening, they were afraid to do anything to stop it because they would have been punished as well. And I think that's why we talked about being careful about our language, about how we speak about other human beings, because if we dehumanize people, it's very easy to fall into the same trap. And that would be really bad, obviously. Nazi establishment of a new racial order. The example I always give is the Nuremberg laws there in your illustrative example, page 182. The Nuremberg laws passed in 1935. Those are the ones that say Jews aren't citizens. You can't even touch a German flag if you're a Jew, like weird stuff like that. Jews can't get married to non-Jews. Jews can't have non-Jews can't have Jewish housekeepers, because the concern would be you'd have an affair with your maid and then have a half Jewish kid. I'm not kidding. Like that part's all about it. This is also one of the reasons why the Nuremberg trials, as Maddie talked to us about a couple weeks ago, are held there, because Nuremberg was such a cultural center for Nazism. That's where this law was signed and named after, and that's where they had the giant party rally. So one of the reasons they did those trials in that city was to symbolically end a lot of the viciousness that had started there. So that's something important to know. We know that 6 million people are going to die who are Jewish. We know there's various reports, 4 to 6 million others. You see some of the others listed there. Who are the Roma? What would we call them before modern times?
Were they gypsies?
Correct. Okay, that's the more modern name of gypsies is Roma. We have gay people, people with physical or intellectual disabilities. There is mass sterilization. They used to go into mental hospitals and sterilize all the patients so they could not have children. So that kind of stuff was fairly common in the Nazi era. So anyway, the people that can early on leave, many people can't afford to leave, and those are the ones who are going to be caught up in the Holocaust, and many of them will die, unfortunately. All right, the last one in number 8, 8.10, culture. Some of you know more about this than I do, so I'll defer to some of you, especially in the physics department. But 19th century is pretty progressive. We have a lot of change. We pass a lot of new laws. We get a lot of new technology. The world is getting better. World War I squats on that. A lot of us start to feel like the world is pointless. We're murderous to each other. We have all this technology, and instead of using it to benefit our fellow human, we use it to kill our fellow human. And that's just debilitating and frustrating and angry for a lot of people. So that's the first one. The second one is we felt like science and technology could solve our problems. They mentioned physicists. On the right-hand side, we have several physicists there. Would any of you budding scientists want to tell us about one of them? David?
I could. So like Enrico Fermi,
Mhm.
he's the guy who comes up with fission.
Which helps
So
me to
with,
what
like,
invention?
Nuclear bombs.
Yes, that's correct. So that's an example of that. Good. So we eventually end up in nuclear power. And so we learned that we know a lot less than we think we do. There's a lot more uncertainty in the world and the universe than we had thought. Without getting into too much detail where I can be forced to explain things I can't understand. All right. So we call this the lost generation. That's the fourth one down. A lot of people are cynical. They're frustrated. They are, bored with society. They don't understand, their lives are different than their parents. We don't have the term teenager yet in the 1920s, but if we did, that would be kind of what we'd have is this: my parents are silly. They don't understand me. They don't like they don't get TikTok, so TikTok, of course, the key to society, that kind of thing. So I am going to create a TikTok channel, I'm pretty sure anyway, just because I got nothing else to do, so why not? All right. And then lastly, women do achieve more opportunity in society because they are part of society more. They're working outside the home. What is the most prominent right women get after World War I in many countries?
Voting.
Voting. Awesome. Great. All right. We'll do a couple of these in number 9, and then we will quit for the day because about an hour, it's saturation for me to make any sense and also for you to pay attention. So you understand that. So we'll do a couple of these, and then we'll be done. So 9.1 is a preview, so we skip that. Okay, we will do 9.2 and 9.3, and then we'll do 9.4 to 9.14 on Monday, okay? And by the way, this morning at 10, I only had 2 people. That's okay, but if any of you are up at 10 and would like to join us on Monday, that'd be great. The 3 of us had a lovely chat, so it's fine. If you're still sleeping, I get it. I mean, sleep as long as you want to. It's your business and your family's business. All right, so 195, 9.2, we're building Europe. Somebody explain the Marshall Plan to me.
It's basically a U.S. plan to help struggling countries in Europe, so they can prevent them from becoming communists.
Correct. So it's a loan program, billions and billions of dollars. So it helps them rebuild. We often see the 1950s called the economic miracle. If you want a job in Europe or in the United States, you're going to have it. They have a lot of work to be done, a lot of construction especially. And so the economies rebound fairly quickly. Within a decade, most of them are doing really well because there's so much demand for growth. And so that's why we also see things like the foundation of what becomes the European Union, et cetera, during that time. All right. And then lastly, on page 196, the Cold War. All of you know this, but why not? So we know that we're going to see a division in the world between America and her allies, those who are democratic capitalist, or in many cases, just not communist. And then we see the Soviet Union with communist dictatorship. There is no formal treaty ending World War II in Europe until 1990. So although we had discussed what to do at the conferences, Yalta and Potsdam, we know that we're going to divide up Germany temporarily. That's the plan. But we didn't talk about staying. The Soviets just decide they need a buffer between themselves and the Germans. And also they want to see if America will do anything to stop them. And so they just stay and will stay for decades on, as you well know. This is called the Iron Curtain, the division between East and West, coined by Winston Churchill at a speech at Westminster College in Westminster, Missouri, about 4.5 hours from here. If you're ever driving out west and you're going past St. Louis, it's about an hour after St. Louis. It's a cool little place to stop. They got a nice museum. It's cool. It was a good rest stop for me as I was driving out west a couple years ago. So highly recommend. All right. Then they call them hot wars. I use the term proxy war. And oddly enough, the AP World Study Guide uses proxy war. And this one uses hot war, which is really weird. Why they wouldn't use the same term, but whatevs. What is a proxy war? Somebody define that for me. And David, while I appreciate your contributions, can somebody else besides David step up here on this one?
So a proxy war is like 2 countries fueling other countries like to fight between them, but like really it's like the other 2 countries that are in charge. Like an example of this is like the United States and Afghanistan, like in the 80s, where like the U.S. funded like jihad, or were they jihad, or was it Al Qaeda?
No, Al Qaeda doesn't exist yet. It's the Mujahideen, who are definitely conservative Muslims.
And like the U.S. funded them to fight the Soviets entering in Afghanistan, and that's an example of a proxy war.
Yes, because were we concerned about the rise of fundamentalist Islam?
No.
What were we concerned about?
The spreading of communism.
Yeah. The way I was describing it to my sophomores is it's like if you got a horse, Kentucky, that is kind of excitable, and so you put blinders on them, literally limiting their vision. So all they can do is look straight forward. The United States government in the Cold War has blinders on. All we see and all we focus on is communism. We associate with some really bad dudes who are not communists, but they're still bad, brutal dictators. And we don't care because we are so fixated on stopping communism. We'll worry about the effects later. This is a great example. The Mujahideen doesn't turn into Al Qaeda, but they definitely include some people that would have been comfortable in both organizations. Let's just put it that way. So it's not a good move long term, but we can't see that because right now it's stop Soviet, stop Soviet, stop Soviet. So that's definitely a good example of that. And here's the last thing we'll end with. It's on many continents. You see it in Africa, you see it in Asia, you see it in Latin America. This is a global issue with these proxy conflicts during the Cold War. So as of now, we will stop for today with that.